fam, for a long time I've been obsessed with New Zealand brands for many reasons, with the main ones being all around quality, transparency, sustainability, community, and more. Bottom line, Kiwi brands are always top notch. Think about it. Anytime you get something from the store that has the New Zealand Fern on it, it's pretty much always going to be a slam dunk. Now, New Zealand, although it's not tiny in physical space, it's a pretty small market for a brand. So for Kiwi brands to succeed, they must get out of their island. Today, I had on David Downs, CEO of a New Zealand story. He's a dynamic leader dedicated to showcasing his nation's values and contributions globally. From championing small businesses during crises to advocating for sustainability and integrity, David embodies the essence of manaakitanga, a concept that encompasses the practice of hospitality, kindness, and generosity towards others, making him a driving force in shaping New Zealand's narrative of progress and inclusivity. So today, we talked about what truly encompasses a Kiwi brand and what it takes for them to get out of the island and succeed in mass markets like America. I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's show, the Kin, which is a membership network, accelerator, and workspace for conscious entrepreneurs. I'm a big fan and encourage you to check out thekin.co. Guys, if you like the show, please share it with a homie or on social media, and definitely subscribe. It truly means the world to me, and you're helping to be a part of this consciousness revolution that we're experiencing. Enjoy the show. David, welcome to the show.
Kia ora, as we say in New Zealand.
Love it, love it. Glad to have you. It's been a long time coming. I like to ask my guests, this is the first question I like to ask them is, what was your last oh shit moment? Whatever comes to mind. It could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It could be just like, what was the last time you thought, oh shit?
Probably yesterday, I was doing a presentation and I was trying to be a bit brave and I was making it interactive and I was using AI as well. So I was getting the crowd to do a little like poll things, about 250 people. And then my idea was I was going to grab all that and in real time put it through ChatGPT and then spit out the answers back on the poll. And the internet went down. So my whole demo didn't work. But, you know, you just pivot. You know, you came back like 10 minutes later and it was working and I could show them. But that moment you go, oh, shit.
So funny.
It keeps you alive.
When the Wi-Fi goes down, the world falls apart. It's so ridiculous, but it's so true.
It's a basic human right, Sebastian, to have Wi-Fi whenever we want it. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, good on you for even just giving that a shot, or bringing in like a live AI thing that you're after. You know, I was just in Cannes for the Lions Festival, the Festival of Creativity there in France. No. And obviously AI, a hot topic there, and as sort of where AI really is at today and sort of like where it's going. But really we're in this big experimentation phase where we have to be fully experimenting because no matter what, within like about 2 to 3 years, it's going to be fully integrated. And so it's just not being scared of it and just testing and trying and messing up and
try it, all the different use cases, and some are going to work really well and some don't. You know, like for me, AI has been really, really helpful for a lot of my work in terms of, someone said to me yesterday, it's not artificial intelligence, it's assisted intelligence. So if you think about it as helping you do the things that you would normally do anyway, then it's a great way to frame it in your head. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, where do you feel New Zealand is at today from an international branding standpoint? How do Europeans, how do Americans see New Zealand brands today?
Fantastic. Well, the answer is it's a little bit different in different parts of the world. On the whole, very well. New Zealand's brand, and our job is to basically, you know, tell a story of New Zealand to the world to help build our brand and build people's understanding of New Zealand, who we are. Different parts of the world are on different parts of that understanding curve. So, you know, Europeans, for example, know New Zealand because of their connection with England, you know, so they know that we are, you know, an ex-English colony, for example. Americans have got this sort of utopian view almost of New Zealand. When you talk about New Zealand to many Americans, you know, I'm talking to one now, so I should be careful, but typically in the research work that we do, it's a very desirable place to visit. It's almost sort of like this mythical place. And so the brand of New Zealand and the companies and the organizations that come out of it almost inherit some of those attributes. It's quite interesting, actually. We realized that people really love the brand of New Zealand. They really dig it. They buy into it, but they actually don't know that much about the details of why. It's like, I know I
Yeah.
like you, but I'm not 100% sure why.
Interesting. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. I think that I definitely see it. I'm biased, right? Because I've been in touch with New Zealand brands for a long time now. But I do think that it has come to a place where people are now definitely have a very positive connection to New Zealand brands. I can tell you, so personally, I've worked with brands introduced to me, whether it's by the New Zealand Trend or Enterprise, that I became very connected to New Zealand brands as of about 7 years ago. And yeah, I love working with Kiwi brands and Kiwi people. Just personally, it's true. I'm not just saying that. I really mean it. We all say it at the agency. There's something about it. There's a difference. It's funny. So I'm originally from Argentina, but I've been in the States for many, 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 many years. And we kind of joke around and we say the U.S. is like Australia, and then Canada is like New Zealand.
That's exactly it.
Right?
It's an analogy we use ourselves. It's like that
Yeah.
big brother, little brother thing. We're sort of very, very closely connected, but at the same time, culturally fairly different.
Totally.
Uh, and yeah, it's great that you have that connection to New Zealand. We often think when one of the things we do at New Zealand Story is try and describe what are the values of the country.
Right.
And a big part of it is, as you say, it's like, how do people feel when they leave this interaction with a New Zealand business or a New Zealander? What is it? Can we try and capture the essence of that? So that's part of our thinking as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what it's all about. By the way, I would say more like nice brother and mean brother instead of little brother. We know
Kind of brother that sort of grabs you and rubs your hair like that sometimes.
exactly. Yeah. 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 So yeah, as I was telling you that my connection, so what my agency, Go Global Agency, which is based in LA, we work with brands like Manuka Health, Bobucks Edition Pet Food. Today we work with First Light Farms, Taylor Path Honey, and other brands. And anyway, so we'll run their social campaigns, influencer marketing, growth marketing. And it's such a pleasure to work with these brands because of not just the people are being who they are, but the values of what the brands stand for, right? So, I was telling you before we started that I'm on the board of Conscious Capitalism in Los Angeles, which is what I'm passionate about, which is about using business to be a force for good. And New Zealand brands almost always seem to embody conscious practices, whether it be sustainability, transparency, community, etc. And you've got the Fern mark on Kiwi brands. For those here listening that don't know, like if you've ever grabbed a piece of packaging, or even if you go to David's New Zealand Story website, you'll see there it is. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. A little symbol of a fern, which essentially, it stands for, it's a symbol of trust. Do you believe that people around the world or in the States have actually learned that? Or how do you think people see that symbol?
Yeah, well, we know that it is exactly that. It's actually the most recognized symbol of our country by a long way. Our flag is very similar to other people's flags. It's an ex-British colony. It's got that sort of element to it. But the fern mark, as you say, for hundreds of years has actually been the association with New Zealand. This is a country that has got an amazing amount of natural forests and bush and things like that, and there are ferns everywhere. But the story of the fern, the silver fern, is really special too, because it was used as a pathfinding, kind of a wayfinding mechanism by the Māori. So the Māori are our indigenous people, the people who came here about 1,000 years ago. New Zealand was the last landmass on the planet to be settled by humans, which is quite amazing. And
Wow.
those Māori settlers used to use the silver fern, in the night, walking through the bush. They would turn over the leaves of the ferns, and on the bottom of the green fern, on the bottom side is silver, and it would reflect the moonlight. And that's how they use it to make paths through the forest. And that kind of symbolism, or that sort of metaphor, has almost been quite well thought of. When the first British settlers came here, they started to bring ferns back to England to show, these exotic, amazing, plants. And so New Zealand became kind of known as the land of ferns for a long time. And even now today, as you say, we still use that symbol as something that means to us. It's about trustworthiness. It's about finding the right path, and that kind of thing. So it's great. And lots of New Zealand businesses, as you know, use the silver fern. It's something we license to them to allow them to use, that they put it on the side of their products to say it's from New Zealand and it's trustworthy.
I love that. And I know that there's certain other specific regulations that a business must pass. And I know that that's on y'all's website and things like that. But ultimately that's definitely what it does. Is
Yeah. Oh, I
transmits.
love you've done your homework, Sebastian. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's country of origins marks. I mean, New Zealand's brand, international brand, as we said earlier, it's the reputation and value is actually very high. Like to be from New Zealand gives you a certain extra value, if you like, and we know that you can measure it. You know, it's about 26% extra in terms of the premium price, the
Hmm.
premium sort of desirability. And so therefore we've got to be really careful that the people that use it are actually from New Zealand and do,
Yeah.
promote New Zealand's brand because, we quite often are telling people from other countries who try and use that symbol that they're not allowed to, it's ours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very important. And you
Yeah.
mentioned Maori, and I was going to ask you this later, but I'll just ask you now. So, how much of Maori culture is still embedded in Kiwi business, do you think? Is that still something that is embedded, or it's more so like, no, it's so modernized now that that's not really there anymore?
Oh no, it's completely the other way, actually. I mean, I think it's so relevant. I mean, there's many of the values of Māoridom, and I'll go through them in a minute, but many of the values are very, very modern in their thinking, and someone said to me the other day that what we need is new ways of thinking about old problems and old ways of thinking about new problems. And that's basically what Māori culture brings is these set of values about ways of thinking about the world. And many New Zealand brands sort of portray that. In fact, the kind of the brand attributes that we bring to, that we talk about that are New Zealand, we express them in Māori values because they are such a modern idea. So can I go through them now? Is that a good
Please
idea?
do. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk about four values from New Zealand that make up the kind of country values. And as I say, many of the companies then also use these, whether they consciously do it or sometimes unconsciously do it.
Yeah.
This one is around manaakitanga. And manaaki in Māori means hospitality, respect. Mana is the idea that you have your individual power, your individual essence, and to manaki someone is to recognize that in them and to make them feel welcome, to make them that this reciprocity and respect. And
Yeah.
so
It's a sense of community as well,
it's a
correct?
community. So when you
Yeah.
come to New Zealand and you feel welcomed and you feel like people are friendly, etc., that's kind of manaki in its essence. And that, again, very ancient idea in Māoridom that to manaki someone is one of the most important things you can do. You welcome them in. The next one is called tiaki, and tiaki is this. It literally means to care or to protect. And again, in Māori culture, there's no concept of ownership of land. There's only the concept that you care for the land and that you are the custodian. And so tiaki is almost this idea of intergenerational guardianship and care for the land. And sometimes care is very, loving, and sometimes it's quite fierce. You really have to care about something deeply and protect it. So that's another big value is
Love
this
that.
intergenerational care for the land. And then the next one is pono, and pono in Māori literally means again sort of trustworthiness, uh,
Yeah.
transparency, honesty, truth.
Right.
And again, this is something that sometimes we New Zealanders, I think, forget because we are, when you do all the international business metrics on things like transparency, ease of doing business, corruption indexes, etc. New Zealand's always one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 countries in the world on all these things in a positive way, in terms of being a very high trust environment, very easy to do business here.
Absolutely.
It's a small population, so you can't really do a bad deal with someone because you're probably going to come across them again, or you're going to know their brother or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So that
Everybody,
trustworthiness,
yeah. Yeah.
everyone knows, not quite everyone, but you get
Right.
pretty close.
It's a small, yeah.
And then the fourth value, which kind of encapsulates this sort of restless energy and this sort of challenging of authority. Again, New Zealand being a very young country, only about 1,000 years old in terms of the humans have been here for that long, you get this essence of sort of restless spirit. And in Māori, we call this word pōkaitanga. And pōtiki literally means the youngest child. So the youngest child is like, the rambunctious, a bit like you said earlier with the two nations. It's sort of, there's the big brothers are doing that. I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to challenge the authority,
Yeah.
sometimes being a little bit cheeky, if you like. And
Right.
that's why New Zealand does things like, we've got a huge adventure sports, culture here. We're
Yeah.
adventurers and explorers. All New Zealanders travel the world all the time, like we are. So it's that kind of essence. And the idea is that these four values, and going back to your point, they're very relevant, so they're ancient ideas, but actually in the modern world, who doesn't want to work with a country that sort of cares about the environment, cares about people, thinks about doing things in a different way, but with the purpose of being caring and open and honest? It's actually quite amazing that we sort of still have that. Now, Māori businesses themselves are even more, like
Yes.
proudly displaying those, very
Right.
overtly displaying those values. But I'd say most New Zealand businesses, when you come across them, and you reeled off a few there, would have a little nugget of all of those things in them as well.
What's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying the show. If you love the show, please share it with a homie. It would mean the world to me. Also want to let you know that you can check out sebastiannam.com for more resources like this, and also www.goglobal.agency, a digital marketing agency that's end-to-end, helping purpose-driven and mission-driven brands scale their impact. Again, that's goglobal.agency or sebastiannam.com. Please hit me up straight up on Instagram, DM me, ask me questions. I'd love to connect with you and see what you thought about this episode or other episodes and what you want to hear more of. Much love. I absolutely love that. I mean, that is such a dream if majority of the world or other countries really, took these values and instilled them in the business. I was going to ask you specifically about manaakitanga and pono. And so I love that you brought that up. And
well, it so fits into your what you're doing with conscious capitalism. The idea that you are conscious about the state that you're in, and you're trying to just be true to your essence, and you can still do business. New Zealand companies still trade internationally. We still have to make a profit. Right. We still have to pay for stuff. It's the same way that we often use the analogy of some of our sports teams. We have this very famous rugby team, the All Blacks, and the All Blacks are the most winningest team in the history of any sport. Their win ratio is 80% plus. It's crazy. Over the whole of history. But at the same, and so they're fierce on the field. They are fierce. They really want to compete and they want to win. But then they go back and they clean up the sheds. They respect their opponents. They do a war dance sort of idea at the beginning called a haka, which is all about actually respecting. It's honoring the other players by showing them the respect that they're going to bring their A game. And so you can have both. You can be, competitive, you can be successful, and you can have strong values.
Absolutely. I mean, I got the chills when you were talking about the haka and honoring the competitor, and I'm just like, man, that's just such a beautiful way of living and of being and existing. I even think about, it's funny, one of the first times I sort of firsthand experienced that is one of my dear client partners that we've had for a long time, which is Taylor Pass Honey, Rebecca Margits of Taylor Pass. She basically was telling me about how she knew all the people from the other Manuka, honey and they were sort of like friends. And I was like, wait, so you're friends with all your competitors, right? Because you were saying hey, everybody knows each other, right? It's still a small world, right? So it's it's good to, and she's like, oh yeah, we're friends with this and this and that. And I'm like, oh man, that's so beautiful. This sort of healthy competition. Sure, we still, we want to go out and win the game. And in this case, for business, you still want to go out and win and generate profits. But ultimately, we're all sort of we can all win together as well. Not in sports necessarily, but in business, 100% when it comes to conscious capitalism, especially when it comes to a specific, in this case, for example, Manuka honey, right? So if Manuka honey, as the staple of New Zealand honey, wins on a global stage, there's plenty to go around for all the brands.
Right. That's almost a truism of New Zealand's export economy, is that the world, relative to our economy, the world is infinitely vast.
Infinite.
And so you might as well, go for the high value opportunities that, that bring others with you to help, etc. But the other ancient concept you just talked about there is the idea of long-term thinking. If you just see a business transaction as a one-off deal, you are going to try and screw each other over. You are going to, do the dirty, where you're going to take excess profits, whatever. But if you realize that actually business is a long-term relationship-based way of thinking, and again, that comes from Māori culture. Literally, Māori businesses will have a 100-year business plan. In
really
Western culture, I'm not kidding. I've seen 100-year, 500-year business plans. So these are organizations that taking this this very long-term perspective of, we have to be successful for our great-grandchildren, We're not here just to make a quick buck and get out. We're actually going to think about, and when you think about 100-year plan, you're thinking about, okay, so what does the land need to look like in the future? What are the living conditions that our workers will be in? How are we making sure that we've got biodiversity under control? Because we can't just sort of screw things over now and have a problem in 20 years' time. That's such a different way of thinking about business. But actually, most businesses need to think that way,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And this is why it's such a pleasure. And we're so passionate about, working with Kiwi brands and helping them grow in America, because that's what it stands for. And that's how all business should be. David, how does a New Zealand brand actually get out of the island, right? So a lot of the times we have brands from New Zealand reach out to me and to us and sort of like, oh, we want to grow in the States. They know it's sort of this massive market, and they know that that's the best way to grow. And they're a bit too early for us to help them out, right? So there's these things that they have to get done first. So what are the sort of first crucial steps for either the small or medium-sized businesses that aren't quite there to actually get out of the island?
Yeah. And this is interesting because it's sort of another truism that, we're a relatively large country in terms of our physical geography. We're about the size of California and Oregon added together.
That's big.
But actually, it's big. It's a big territory, but we've actually only got 5 million people. So we're like one suburb of LA, So it's one of our challenges. We have a very small domestic market. Then if you're selling products into the domestic market, you pretty much run out of space pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So therefore, you've got to go internationally to grow, and therefore you get all these challenges that, like you said, Sebastian, businesses that are they're early in their career, they're early stage, but they're trying to export, which is one of the most difficult things you can do is grow businesses internationally. Think about cross-border trade, all the different laws, all the different tax regimes, all that stuff. But it's just what we have to do, and so they need help. They basically need help. The other thing is about the markets that they go into are typically much more sophisticated. In New Zealand, you're selling maybe direct or maybe into one level of channel. So you're selling into the distribution straight to the supermarkets. In places like the States, you're selling into multi-layer distribution models. There's co-op marketing models that you have to think about, different state legislation, etc. So therefore, they need help. So on the ground and around the world, there are New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is a government agency, NZTE, that you talked about. NZTE, sorry. Mm-hmm. They have offices around the world, and they typically have people from those markets helping those New Zealand businesses navigate some of that complexity. But this is one of the good and the bad things, I suppose. New Zealand is typically, again, goes back to our kind of really deep cultural values of, challenging authority, sometimes being, wanting to be a bit different. What that can often mean is it's a really good place to start businesses. People don't see the barriers. I'm going to give it a go. I can do this. I can do everything myself. Yeah. You go internationally, you can't do everything yourself. It's tricky. It's difficult. You need advice from people like you and your organization. The cultures that you're going into are very different than New Zealand culture. You can't treat them the same. So you've got to get that advice from organizations like NZTE or, the trade associations, these business councils, peer groups, all that sort of stuff can help.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately the bottom line is, for any brand out there that's sort of listening in New Zealand, a small or medium size that hasn't quite gotten out there, just don't be afraid to ask for help. Go to NZT or go to other organizations. You got to get that help because, like you said, there's so many different layers and nuances to each and every country and region. Obviously, we're here in the States, which is a massive, massive market, and it's a bit different for Europe and things like that. And even with us, when it comes to the marketing side of things, a lot of the times brands will say, "Hey, well, we speak the same language. We can market anywhere in the world that speaks English, for example." And it's like there's not quite, because there's so
not
many.
At all.
Right, cultural nuances. I remember a lot of the times we were talking about how to communicate things with our Kiwi partners. It was like we say things very directly in the States.
Yeah,
right. We're just very direct. Like, hey, this is the best coffee. We sell the best coffee, and this is why it's the best coffee, right? Because it's the beans come from here, and we have conscious farming and this and that. And then sure, we've got all these we're going to tell the story, but we're going to toot our own horn, as we say here in the States.
Yeah.
While the Kiwi's like, oh my gosh, no, I would never do that. So
it can be quite comical at times, actually. And this is, again, a cultural thing. Like New Zealand there's sort of a value of humility. And again, it goes back to sort of this long-term thinking. People are very humble. They don't want to make a big deal. And I was at a trade event once. Part of my job is sometimes to go with New Zealand businesses internationally, and we were actually in San Francisco, so NorCal,
Yeah.
and we got this whole group of investors into the room. A lot of imagine these Silicon Valley type. They are, the peak of their game in terms of their work. And we had these New Zealand businesses, and the job was, we're mixing match like a dating service, try and get them to talk.
Yeah.
And of course, the Kiwi businesses are all very humble and sort of standing there with their arms folded and a little. And one of the guys, I remember introducing them to this investor, and the investor said, "Oh, tell me what you do. What's your business?" And the guy goes, "Oh, yeah, it's all right. Like, we're pretty good." And of course, in New Zealand, if I could translate, pretty good means you're amazing. But in America, pretty good means, oh no, you're nowhere near. So they were just miles apart from each other. And the investor, you can see him just going, "What the heck is this guy on about?"
Yeah.
And sort of walked off. So we always say, and this is again, country by country is very different.
Right.
When you're going to America, you've got to bring your A game. You've got to really bring your confidence. You've got to bring that kind of haka, that thing we said earlier.
Right.
You've got to bring that. When you go to other countries like Japan, humility is absolutely valued, right. And you should absolutely be downplaying and very respectful. So it's different. Markets require different adaptations of your style. Never straying from your true essence and values. They stay the same, but it's kind of how you portray yourself in those scenarios.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we like to do there is how can we help tell the story through other American voices, whether it's creators or influencers and things like that, connecting them with those stories of New Zealand so that the American storytellers really understand the concept and can share those values of the New Zealand brands here in the States. So in terms of sort of sharing the values and identities, like how does New Zealand's story help promote New Zealand's values and identity at a global stage? How are you guys helping with the storytelling? Because storytelling is so big. It's so important to the success of the New Zealand brands.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of key theory is that, human beings, the way that we connect with people and the way that we sort of make sense of the world is through stories. And that sounds really, some people think that sounds really, fanciful and a bit trivial, but actually for thousands of years, that's how our ancestors have transmitted the truths of the world, is through telling each other stories. And so we do the same sort of thing. So our role is, we do a bunch of stuff. We do a lot of market research because before you can tell anyone a story, you need to understand what they already think and feel and who they are. So we do a lot of market research to understand those markets and their perceptions of New Zealand. And then we work with New Zealand companies and, sports teams and, education institutes, whoever it might be, to help them, and to tell their story in a way that those markets will really appreciate. That again demonstrates the core values of the country we come from, and it's social media marketing, it's mainstream media when we can get it, and bought sort of stuff, but mainly it's actually helping businesses do that themselves because our budget relative, to what we could be doing is tiny. Yeah. We can't go out there and do big ad campaigns like some countries in the world do. We just don't have the budget for it. But if every New Zealand business, like the ones you mentioned, are telling an authentic New Zealand story, are showcasing who they really are, and doing it in a very proud way, then actually it sort of, floats the boats for everybody. So that's the theory, is teach people about New Zealand story, show them how to use it, make sure that when they're doing it, and using things like the Fern mark that you mentioned earlier, that Fern mark is a great way to kind of connote that sort of same value set to other products as well. So
absolutely.
That's the theory.
Yeah, and I think y'all are doing an incredible job at it. Frankly, really, you truly are. New Zealand story and just New Zealand brands in general, and NZTE, and like sort of the way y'all collaborate with each other to tell this story is beautiful, and and it works because it's authentic and it's real. And so we're in a world that we can really find out the truth pretty fast nowadays. And we could also we're surrounded by lies, but if you really dig, you can find the truth, right? And and frankly, I'm in LA, right? And Los Angeles is sort of the mecca of health and wellness and all this sort of the brands that pair and what you're putting in your body matters. So I'm also in a bit of a little bit of a bubble in that sense, where people are even more informed about the brands that care, and they're more informed about what a New Zealand brand may stand for. Which I think is one of the reasons that a lot of brands in the world that are very much conscious brands kind of come to LA to sort of launch in the States. But I think that could be, wider spread in the rest of the States here and the rest of the world.
Well, that's the kind of point of having a set of values that you kind of very overtly think about, is because not just because you're trying to transmit in a kind of selling marketing sense. It's how you find consumers or brand or other companies or whatever that are going to be aligned with your way of thinking, you know? So the reason that they go to LA, yes, there's a big market. Clearly, there are people that care about their body, etc. But actually, it's also that they know that there'll be a value set that's got alignment, and that's a much easier way to do business with organizations or people that are aligned to your set of values. And the sooner you know that, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we can have the best storytelling and the most conscious practices and all of these beautiful things, but if a brand isn't making money and making profits, it's never going to work. It's not going to scale.
Yeah.
It's also not going to scale its impact. So what are y'all at New Zealand Story? Are you able to collaborate with businesses and stakeholders to ensure that economic success is also aligned with the social and environmental responsibility?
Absolutely. I mean, that you're 100% correct. Like, if you're going out there and doing all these wonderful things and being incredible, but you're not financially sustainable, then you haven't got a business. You're a charity, you know, and there's nothing wrong with charities, but you've got to be financially sustainable. You've got to make a profit that can then sustain the business in the medium and long term. So for us, the big thing is, you know, the idea of storytelling and the idea of sort of this sort of value stuff can sound, you know, very fluffy and very lovely.
Right.
The reality is, you know, cold hard, it makes a difference to your bottom line. You know, you can command a higher premium price for the same products and services because of the values that you portray, because of the country that you're from, you know, all of that stuff. And it's provable, you know, it's worth about a 25 to 26% premium value, as I said. So, and that's measurable. You know, you can look at different products, the same product from different countries, and start to do a kind of regression analysis. So New Zealand businesses that are going into the US that really understand how to portray their New Zealandness, hook into those kind of deep psychological desires of their consumers that make them want to come to a country like us or have this admiration, they can get a higher price, you know. So why wouldn't you want to go down that track?
Yeah. It's worthy of that higher price. That it's deserving to the company, the consumer also, as we're sort of seeing conscious consumerism grow, is willing to pay for that premium. Yeah. And also, you know, if a lot of brands in New Zealand are consumables, right? It's something that we're consuming in our body. We're eating, drinking, or we're putting on our body, right? So a lot of those products come from New Zealand, and so the more that consumers are becoming conscious about what they're putting into their bodies, they're also seeing like, hey, sure, I may be paying a premium here at the grocery store, at the store, or online, wherever they're buying it. But ultimately, like, I'm actually spending less money because I'm not going to have health problems when I'm older. You know, like it's worth not me getting cancer, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years or whatever it is.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. You know, New Zealand, again, you can sort of take that sort of logical path as well. You know, high quality growing conditions, much better for the environment, much better for that, you know, it's an animal product. You know, a lot of countries around the world, for example, feed their cows inside, or they have them in feedlots or whatever. New Zealand cows by default are outside eating the natural grass grown from the sun. There's all these sort of logical arguments as well. Often the logical arguments are good; they sort of help out, but actually the emotional things are the hook. But again, that's exactly it. You know, you buy these products and services, feel good about it because you're actually doing good for the planet. You know, we like to say this phrase, which wasn't actually a New Zealand thing. A guy called Jack Ma, you might remember, Jack Ma set up Alibaba, big, you know, Chinese sales platform. Yeah. And at an event we were at once, Jack Ma said, the thing about New Zealand is that you're not just good in the world, you're good for the world. You're like, it's good that there's a country like New Zealand that exists because the rest of us can look at you and go, that's, you know, there's things you do that we should all be doing. Your products and services are good when we get them. So it's almost become this, you don't use it as a campaign, but it's actually quite a lovely way to think about it, is that we need to be an exemplar and we need to actually make sure that people are getting that brand promise from us. You know, it's great to go out there and say we are great, you know, we care for the environment, we care for people and place. But actually, you got to make sure that those consumers are getting that value exchange.
They have to be getting the value exchange. The stories have to be told in certain ways. Stories can be told differently in different places. That's part of what we're sort of talking about here. So a story may be told differently in New Zealand than in the States, even though it's the same story. So that's something that's important, I think, for brands to keep in mind in New Zealand.
Well, that's why they have experts like you, because the same essence of the same story needs to come across in a different way in different parts of the world.
Correct.
Exactly right.
Yeah. But the key there, though, is that authenticity and transparency, it's going to win no matter what. So
Yeah.
brands have to keep that, that authenticity and transparency. And like you said from the get-go, it's like stories, it's truly what connects us all, no matter how, advanced AI gets and all that stuff. Ultimately, stories is what makes us feel connected to each other. And connection to each other and community and human connection is forever going to be there, because it's crazy. The worst thing you can do to somebody ever is put them in solitary confinement. That's worse than any sort of torture, is to actually put them in a place with no light and no other contact to humans. That's the worst thing, which shows you we essentially need that connection that contact can provide, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that New Zealand brands definitely do that really beautifully. So awesome. It's telling it authentically. And so how about you personally, David? How do you personally integrate principles of conscious leadership into your decision-making and processes when it comes to interactions with your team?
Yeah. I mean, we've adopted those values that I mentioned earlier. Those sort of, there are, as I say, we define them as the values of our country, but we've actually, as our organization, we're a small organization. There's less than 20 people that, but our job is, as I say, showcase New Zealand to the world. We've adopted those practices ourselves. So we hold ourselves accountable to them. We make sure that we are, demonstrating the same sort of values that we are asking others to demonstrate. We're a government-funded organisation as well, so we've got to be conscious of the fact that we're custodians of other people's money, so that we're making sure that we're spending our money wisely. We spend a lot of time with New Zealand companies trying to showcase to help them do their work. So that's a manaaki thing, like building the mana of others is a big part of what our job is. So it's those kind of practices in action that we've got to really come back to. But yeah, it's part of the ethos of being a New Zealander as well, as you do think about these things in a different way. We're very lucky also at my organisation is that we are connected to, we have a Māori advisory group. So these are people, really senior business leaders from the Māori community who help guide us on some of this journey, because we want to make sure we're authentic so that, they'll hold us to account. They'll make sure that we are doing the right things. We meet with them on a regular basis and say, here's kind of what we're doing. And, sometimes they'll say, no, you shouldn't go down that path. That's not the right approach. So it's useful.
I love that, David. That's so cool that you do that. I can't, I can just picture sort of, CEOs here in LA going to sort of the Native American tribe to sort of that would be the equivalent of that. And that's
exactly equivalent.
Almost non-existent here.
Yeah. Oh, every time we do it, I learn something, and these people are, normal business people. They've got their own businesses, but they're coming at it from this Māori world view, this long-term intergenerational view, non-exploitative, partnership-based. And you always learn a different way of thinking, about a scenario or about an ad campaign or whatever it is. They can be quite tactical. Some of the things we can be asking them is, tactically, could we do this? And they'll go, no, and here's yes or no, or here's why, or here's the thing you haven't thought about. It's really valuable.
That's so cool. That's amazing. So talking about sort of these big 100-year plans that the Māori, inspire, where do you see, New Zealand brands and perhaps how a New Zealand story may be connected to that in the future of, New Zealand and Kiwi brands in the world?
Well, I think we're on an evolution. I mean, the brand of New Zealand is, as I say, it's a valuable asset for us to have as a country. I often think about it. She's got like this balance sheet, like a big corporate balance sheet. One of the items on your balance sheet is your brand value. And I think that's always going to be high. And our job is to make sure that stays high. But the other big part of it is to make sure that the businesses in New Zealand know how to A, enhance it, and B, get the value from it. So those two things are really important. There's no point in having an asset that you don't utilize. So the big thing for us now and in the future is to keep helping the organizations that come from New Zealand. I keep saying businesses because this is the business podcast, but it can be sports teams, it can be education, tourism operators, whatever. They've got to learn. They've got to work out that they've got this unique selling proposition, to use a very Western way of thinking, and how might they use it in a way that they get some advantage from. So that's probably the journey that we're constantly on, is helping, learning, teaching New Zealand organizations about brand, about how valuable it is, about how to work with the international markets and people like yourselves to actually then, take those messages and make them appropriate to the market.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I personally hope that New Zealand brands continue to expand around the world, not just because of what they stand for and for their own success, but also to be examples for other brands in other parts of the world, to take on and emulate. Lastly, David, I want to ask you, what are the top 2 traits that a conscious leader must embody today?
Wow. It's so funny. I think, I've studied leadership a little bit. And over the last sort of 10, 20 years, there's this shift in leadership from being leaders at the front, follow me, I know everything, the sage on a stage model, through this new leadership model of authenticity, vulnerability, but still strength. And so to me, I think that's again, it loops right back to some very ancient ways of thinking. Leaders, yes, they have to set vision and direction, but they don't have to lead. They don't have to be the person that says, I know everything. So I think that to me, leadership is going to be about, being conscious about where you can add value, what you know, but actually, how do you get the best out of others? How do you make sure that others are bringing their A game as well? So I've loved that this transition of leadership to this model of the sort of authentic, vulnerable, but very values. That's where we should hold our solid truth, as in our set of values. We shouldn't be, so stuck on an individual idea that we can't let it go. And I do think that's one of the challenges we see in the world at the moment, is you get these sort of very single-minded, people who are stuck on a set of tactical things, but actually they need to let some of that stuff go and go back to their core values. Who are they as people?
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I told you that would be the last question, but something you said brought something up, because I think that there's this thing about vulnerability that is becoming almost like this sort of trending topic for people that it's good to be vulnerable, which is great. Yeah. And so at the same time, there's this sort of, okay, what does vulnerability actually mean? Does it mean that when I'm going through the shit or I'm going through the problem, am I crying to the camera and live streaming it? All right, because that's happening. And then, or how can you be vulnerable and then still be that strong leader? How do you see that connection between vulnerability and strength?
Yeah, I think you do have to be careful. It's not performative in terms of, the script says I should cry now because that would make me feel more vulnerable and appeal to, women over the age of 40 or whatever. Yeah. That's very fake when you see that sort of stuff, and you do see it every now and then. A little bit of the talk show way of being vulnerable. Yeah. No, I think it's more the fact that great leaders in my mind will admit what they don't know, change their minds when the facts change, that give them a different way of looking at things. Be open to new perspectives and ideas. None of that is a weakness. It's a huge strength. Great leaders. And just to pick one area, like great military leaders of the past have been people that will change their strategies because the data changes. Mm-hmm. The people the military leaders that were the not great leaders were the ones that just had a single-minded tactic and just kept going, even though everything was like going against them. Take those analogies into the business world. You've got to be able to pivot and change as the market changes, as the information changes. So vulnerability, as I say, is not necessarily this weakness. It's actually this openness to admitting that you're wrong sometimes.
Love it. Love that. Well, David, you truly are a conscious leader, and I absolutely love what you guys are all doing at New Zealand Story. And, New Zealand brands, definitely check out New Zealand Story. And just keep doing you. Appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for everything, and thank you for being on.
Mihiana kia koe, which is, I recognize you, and greetings to you. Thanks, Sebastian, for having me.
I love that. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you like the show, please subscribe or share with a homie. It means the world to me. And honestly, straight up, just hit me up. The easiest way on Instagram, SEBNAUM. Ask me questions. I want to be here as a resource and a source of inspiration. I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day. Much love.